Hello, gang. Today we're going to be reviewing for our quiz on safety and the scientific method. You do not have to take notes on this video. I'm going to cover all of the things that you need to know for the quiz tomorrow. Um, if you need additional help, if things come up in this video that you're not too sure about, you can always go back and look at the past lessons that we've done, the past videos. There's two on the scientific method, there's one on experimental design, and the safety stuff I'm going to cover pretty well. Plus we just did the safety lab, so you should be ready for that. So let's get started. You should know what it means to have a safety first attitude. It means that safety is always the first thing that you think about. It's foremost in your mind when doing lab work. You're always going to be aware of what the safety procedures are and any safety concerns for each particular lab. Now, the way you're going to know this, of course, is you're always going to read and follow all directions. If you're unsure about something, go back and read it again or ask the teacher. Ask the people in your group. That's why one of the reasons that we work in groups, so that we can help each other out. When you read the directions, you're going to know what to do, and you're going to be aware of all safety concerns. And it's going to make the whole lab environment safer for everyone. Okay, we learned about several different categories of safety rules, and here's a list of the ones that you should know. These are basically general safety rules that you should know when working in the science lab. Always wear safety goggles when working with chemicals, glassware, or heat. Tie back long hair. Secure loose sleeves and jewelry. Do not wear open-toed shoes when working with glassware, chemicals, etc. Never perform activities that are not assigned. No mad scientist experiments, please. Do not eat or drink in the lab, especially out of lab glassware. Keep work areas clean and no horseplay. Okay, the next area of safety rules is heating safety. Again, when heating, using heat or flames, whether it's a hot plate or a Bunsen burner, you're going to wear safety goggles. Never reach across an open flame or put anything in the flame. All flammable things should be away from the flames. Tie back or secure loose hair and clothing. Never point a heated test tube at yourself or anyone else. And finally, never heat a closed container. Those gases will expand as it heats, pressure will build up, and it could possibly explode. Okay, next category, fire safety. Remember, stop, drop, and roll if you should ever catch on fire. Use the fire blanket to help put out a fire on a person. Remember, you ask them to get down to the ground first. Again, stop, drop, and roll. If a person's standing up, it's harder to put the fire out. Also, the fire is going to be working up towards their face and their mouth and their breathing. So it's better for them to get low, and you can more easily put the blanket over them. Be sure not to be forcing flames towards their face with the fire blanket. If a fire is in not on a person, if it's in the garbage can or on a lab table, you'd use a fire extinguisher for that. But make sure you're using the proper type of fire extinguisher. The one in our classroom is for all types of fires, types A, B, and C. You don't want to use water on either a type B or C fire. When using a fire extinguisher, remember the acronym PASS. P, pull the pin. A, aim at the base of the fire. S, squeeze the trigger. And S, sweep back and forth. Okay, next, we learned about fire drills and some of the things that we should and should not do during fire drills. Remember, we need to close, but do not lock all doors and windows. This is going to limit the oxygen getting to the fire. It will slow down the spread of the fire. Turn off the lights and electronics. In a fire, if the wires melt and the electricity is on, that could lead to a bigger problem. Exit quickly and quietly in a single line. Follow the exit plan and listen for directions. Okay, next we have safety rules for when you're using chemicals or glassware. Never mix chemicals for the fun of it. Always follow the directions. Do exactly what the lab tells you to do. Never touch, taste, or smell a chemical unless directed to do so by your teacher. If you do have to smell a chemical, make sure you're using the wafting method. Don't put your face right up to the chemical. Stay back a little ways and waft a little bit towards your face. You should be able to smell it fine that way. Make sure you're disposing of all chemicals properly. The teacher will tell you if things can go down the sink or not. Notify the teacher of any spills right away. Never use broken or chipped glassware. Never eat or drink from lab glassware. Thoroughly clean your glassware and work surfaces. And of course, when working with chemicals, you're going to wash your hands at the end of the lab. Now, if there does happen to be an accident, and they do happen, there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. If there is an accident where a person could be injured, uh, you know, it's of course important to notify the teacher, but you want to take care of the emergency first. You don't want to waste time trying to get the teacher or get the teacher's attention. You know, if somebody's on fire, if they just got acid on their skin or chemical in their eye, you want to start taking care of the emergency right away. That's the very first thing. Head to the eye wash station, get to the fire blanket, rinse the chemical off, head to the sink. You know, at the same time, you can call for help, notify the teacher. But the most important thing is to minimize the injury, to help the person out in the emergency. And then at the same time, or just after that, you would notify the teacher. And remember to report all accidents, no matter how small, even if it seems minor. Let the teacher decide, you know, what the cleanup procedure should be, or you know, if we need to consult a nurse or anything like that. Okay, that's about all you need to know about safety. Let's go over some of the things that we learned about the scientific method. Again, I'm going to go very quickly through this part because it's all in previous videos, and it's also in your notes. You can go back and review it that way. But let's start with the steps of the scientific method. Remember, it's always going to start with a question or a problem. You're then going to do some research, find out as much as you can. After that, you would develop your hypothesis, which is usually written as an if-then statement. Sometimes you can even add because, you know, to explain why you think that would happen. Then would come designing your experiment or coming up with the procedure. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the vocabulary here, the controlled experiment, manipulated responding, etc., in just a minute. Once you've got your experiment planned, you're going to then perform the experiment. You will be collecting data. Usually you would be using a data table to put your data into. You might make that into a graph afterwards. You're then going to interpret your data, figure out what your data is showing, and that would lead you to your conclusion where you're going to answer the question, does my data support my hypothesis? You would finally write a report describing your findings using the formal lab report procedures, which I talked to you guys about. Okay, here are some of the vocabulary words that we learned that go along with experimental design. You need to know these for the quiz. A controlled experiment. This is an experiment where all the variables are controlled or kept constant except for the one factor being tested. And of course, that one factor would be your independent variable. The word variable just means something that is changing in the experiment, but you need to know about the different kinds of variables. The independent or manipulated variable, they mean the same thing. Independent or manipulated variable, that's the factor that you're testing in the experiment. It's the one thing that you're going to be changing on purpose, the one thing that you're manipulating. That's a good way to remember what it means. You're manipulating it. You're changing it. and you're trying to find out what would happen. Now, the dependent variable is going to change in response to what you do with your independent or manipulated variable. So dependent or responding variable means the same thing. It's a factor which changes in response to the independent variable. This is what you measure in the experiment. All right, so like if you're doing an experiment with plants, you might be measuring how tall they grow. The height of the plant would then be your dependent or responding variable. And then we learned about constants. I always use the word constants instead of controlled variables. These are all the things that you keep the same in each experimental setup. The reason I use the word constants is I don't want you to be confused with the next thing, which are experimental controls. An experimental control, this is like your normal setup. It's where you do part of the experiment, but you leave the variable out. You leave the independent variable out and see what happens. See what happens. This is the one that you're not testing on. You do this so that you have something to compare your experimental results to. You know, sometimes your independent variable is not doing anything, and unless you do an experimental control, you don't know that for sure. Okay, so the experimental control is a good way to you know, make sure that your variable, your independent variable, is having an effect at all. Okay, that covers everything that's going to be on your quiz tomorrow. Again, go through your notes, go back and look at some of the old videos, and you'll do great. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.